podcast is a member of WildGamesProductions.com and D20Radio.com.
Welcome to the All Initiative Podcast, the only advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition podcast in superior edition.
Wolf Initiative Podcast, we're in volume number 3. We're doing a special insert today. My name is DM Vince. I'm sitting alongside DM Nick today.
Hello, everybody.
And today we have a special guest to follow up on the modules we just got done completing with the A-Series module, the Slaver Series. We have one of the authors of the Slaver and the playtester as well, Lawrence Schick, on the phone. Mr. Schick, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Good to hear from you. We have a lot of questions to ask you, and I know you've seen the questions, but we're eager to ask these questions and hear what you have to say about them.
Well, let's get going then.
All right, let's get started off. So let's start with some general questions. How did you get started in gaming, sir?
In 1964, my father brought home a copy of the original Square game board of Gettysburg from Avalon Hill.
Oh, wow.
And my brothers and I started playing war games, and we played all sorts of games. And eventually, when role-playing games came along, got into those as well.
Interesting. And from that point on, we're going to move a little bit further in your life. How did you wind up meeting Gary Gygax? And, basically, how'd you wind up meeting Gary Gygax to get into TSR?
I had really gotten into playing Dungeons & Dragons. Role-playing games combined my interests of gaming and storytelling. And I was always good with numbers, so I had done a lot of amateur design of D&D type stuff. And when I saw that the TSR was looking to hire an outside designer to begin expanding to deal with the increasing demand for D&D products in the late 70s, I decided I was going to get that job. So I went to one of the little conventions that TSR put on at that time, little gaming weekends up in Wisconsin, and met Gary, and he assigned me to do a sample for them, to see if I had the chops to be a professional D&D designer. So the sample I did was White Plume Mountain. I cobbled together a bunch of ideas from my campaign that I'd been running with Tom Moldvay back in Akron, Ohio, and wrote that up as to show that I could design dungeons. And Gary liked it enough, said, to my surprise, they were going to publish it without changing a word, and hired me as a designer. And I moved to Wisconsin.
Wow, that's pretty darn impressive. Now, this is probably, 78, 79, you would say, right around there?
This is late 78. I started at TSR in January of 79.
Okay, so now was Tom Moldvay, was he already there, or were you kind of coming in the TSR at the same time? Because you were both from the same area, and did you both go to Kent State and just kind of met through gaming there? How did your relationship with Tom get in there and get into TSR?
We met at Kent State. We were both science fiction and comics and games fans. We were both involved with the science fiction society at Kent State University, put on a convention there, and he actually came back from a science fiction convention sometime 76, 77, having played D&D for the first time, and we got hold of a partially Xeroxed copy of the White Box Rules, and went from there. We actually ran a double GM campaign. We came up with a world that eventually became the known world and later Mystara. So we ran a campaign in which players could play in either of our dungeons and our adventures, and ran for each other. Then after I went to TSR, about I pretty soon became the director of design, and we were staffing up, and so I brought Tom in along with hired a bunch of other folks like Zeb Cook and artists like Errol Otis and like Paul Hitching. And that's how we staffed up TSR.
Oh, it sounds like around that time, 78, 79 was really when TSR was ramping up with a lot of the, I guess we would call the legendary staff, if you will.
Mm. Definitely.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, they had some success with the Holmes basic set and decided that we were going to expand on that. And so for the staff that did the original basic and expert sets, and went from there into relatively large sales for the time.
Mm.
All right, let's skip ahead just a tiny bit. So, the time Advanced Dungeons and Dragons comes out, Gary acknowledged you as help in the Dungeon Master's Guide. What can you tell us about that?
Well, my first assignment when I arrived in Wisconsin, Gary handed me this box full of manuscript.
Boy.
And said, "This is the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's not done, and it needs to be organized. So you edit it, organize this, and figure out what goes where. And there's a few parts that I didn't feel like writing that you need to finish. So finish those up."
Oh,
and he's probably and no pressure, right?
Right, and this is our big release for the year. So
no pressure. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, really.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I organized the Dungeon Master's Guide. There were some things like underwater rules and unarmed combat and aerial rules and things, and detection of invisibility, that kind of stuff that I wrote because Gary was just done. But I wrote it to his direction, and I was one who insisted that we had to have an index. It was a reference book, by God. Reference books have indexes. So I did the index.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
So that was the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Well, that answers that question, definitely. So let's skip ahead to the Slaver series modules that you were involved with, and you play tested in all of them and wrote the fourth one. And how did you get? How was it playtesting? First of all, with all the legendary people in there, and as well as did some things not get put in there that should have been, and were there anything cut out that we would like to know about? Maybe you can tell us an inside story about the Slaver module series.
Not about the playtesting because I just don't remember.
Right.
We certainly tested it. They were originally written as tournament modules, so the important thing was to test them as if they were being played in a tournament. So, that meant, all right, you're going to be doing this subset of the module. You've got exactly 4 hours. You've got exactly this many players. And here's the situation. Now go. Let's see if we can break it.
Okay.
So that's, and then once you had the tournament stuff done, then turning it into a published module meant coming up with the context and the background for it, the linking material so that you could link them together into a sort of mini campaign, which you don't care about in a tournament, but which players care about for home use. And coming up with the with new monsters and things, and which were standard in modules at that time. People loved having new monsters.
Oh, of course, definitely. Who doesn't like a new monster to use?
Oh, no kidding. Well, that's pretty. I thought it was interesting. Also, along with this module is, and that whole Slaver series being used in a tournament. What was that tournament like at that? I believe it was at Gen Con. How was that running that? And I believe you were one of the head folks in running that tournament for AD&D there. What was that whole experience like for you and trying to get that all organized?
Yeah, that was before the RPGA, so we didn't have staff that were dedicated to that sort of thing until, I think, the following year.
So you were kind of just breaking new ground there.
Well, Not really. The guys who had started TSR, Gary and the Blooms and their friends, they were serious war gamers, and they had been running conventions for a dozen years, and they had been putting on tournaments and playing in tournaments for as long as they'd been going on. They were really into the tournament scene, so they had very clear ideas about how they wanted tournaments to run and what tournament play was supposed to be like. And Gary was an avid participant in the tournaments in the early years, in making sure they ran the way he wanted, because he thought that was just tremendous fun. So when we had to run the Gen Con tournaments for that year, it really meant, by that time Gary and his pals were too busy running the company. So it meant I and my staff had to put it together and run it. Frankly, it took away so much time from production of new content to publish that's one of the reasons why they established the RPGA, so they'd have dedicated people to do it instead of having to take away their designers.
So that's how the RPG came about. Let's have
one
our
of the
own
reasons,
staff for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
So we had a very clear template of how to run tournaments from all the previous years. So we didn't have to make things up in that regard. We just had to follow the standards.
Okay, I see. So, but after that, they're like, "Hey, we need an actual organization to do this stuff, drawing from our resources from time to time because it's taking away from projects." That makes sense. Okay. Huh.
Okay. So, next question is: there was a reference to the God of Earth dragon in there. There was limited information on that. Can you tell us anything about this? Was it meant to go anywhere? Because the only thing we found about it was some later editions mentioned it, but we're not concerned with that. We're concerned with more of the AD&D time.
Yeah, no, that was kind of a throwaway. That was just you would put hooks into modules for the game master to build upon, because we were not yet in the era where there was so much reference material that GMs could find anything they wanted about anything they wanted to know. So it was assumed that a module was part of a GM's greater campaign, and the GM was making a lot of stuff up. So you'd throw hooks in for the game master to hang stuff on and make things up if they wanted to, or ignore if they didn't care about it, and that was one of those.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Very nice.
Nick, you want to grab the next question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess we're going to kind of go back a little bit, or I guess it's around the same time, is about the module White Plume Mountain. And it's a big favorite from the AD&D crowd from really since its inception. And it was so popular enough that when TSR got to do their 25th anniversary silver edition box set, they put a copy of that in there. I was just kind of curious, what's the backstory on White Plume Mountain, how that got all started, and the inspiration for that whole adventure, if you could maybe elaborate on that.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't really written to be published. It was written to get me a job.
Okay.
I had been running a D&D campaign pretty regularly for several years, and I had created a bunch of dungeons that I was pretty pleased with, and I just went through those and kind of took out what I thought were the cleverest ideas that indicated that I was could come up with fun stuff for players. Came up with a pretty thin conceit to string them all together, really, and just drew this dungeon and wrote it up in the most amusing fashion I could manage at the time, to demonstrate that they needed to hire me, and I guess it hung together well enough because they decided to publish it. And that's really just the backstory behind it.
And I have to, at least for me, I know I would say for most people, that has really withstood the test of time. It's come to known as like kind of a funhouse dungeon. It's got a little bit of everything in it, but it's a really amazing piece of work. and it's really enjoyable to run.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was that was during a time when D&D was still very close to its roots in gaming, and so stuff that was sort of overtly gamey was perfectly acceptable because players were you were trying to challenge the players and give them a good time. And it was later that we got into more of the storytelling and ambiance and context, all of which I approve of. But it can have the effect of de-emphasizing the moment-to-moment challenge for the players, which is really what the game is all about. If you're running a good game, you are pacing it so that the players are constantly doing something fun rather than listening to your story. White Plume Mountain was just a big collection of fun stuff to do, and so players naturally enjoyed it.
And it was good enough. They did a sequel later on.
So
which was actually rather enjoyable as well. But one thing about White Plume Mountain I have to ask, Black Razor. Is that an actual ripoff of Stormbringer? I have to ask.
It is an actual ripoff of Stormbringer.
Okay.
I put it in there to show that I could. One of the things I could do was to adapt stuff from other media into Dungeons and Dragons. So here was something that was really cool from another medium. Here's how you do it in game terms. If I was writing it to be published, I wouldn't have put in something that was let's call it an homage, such a clear homage to something.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's why that was in there.
Yeah, and I just remember even I running it. That's the magic item we get there. Like, do we really want to give it back to the guy, or do we want to keep it? So, yeah, it's one of those things. It's a great homage to story.
Definitely. Okay, so let's jump over to the Star Frontiers game itself. Now, how are you involved with Star Frontiers, and did Gary bring this project to you and have you write some of it, and what were your thoughts on it, pretty much?
Gary was not involved with Star Frontiers.
Okay.
TSR wanted to expand its line beyond fantasy. Traveler was successful. It was out there as a pretty vibrant competitor in the science fiction realm. TSR looked at that and wanted a piece of that. So they said, let's do a science fiction RPG. That was, at that time, I had been the director of design for about a year. It was frustrating for me because I wasn't getting to do enough design. So I stepped back from being director and went back to being a game designer and collaborated then with Zeb Cook on coming up with Star Frontiers. I came up with sort of the basics of the rules, and then Zeb worked on a lot of the basics of the background. We split up the alien races, and we came up with a complete game. Then, right around then, before it was published, I left TSR and went off to go freelance. Then they rewrote it a lot. They simplified it from being a AD&D level thing to try to make it more of a introductory game, which was a different market than it was originally designed for. And they added little simplified miniature rules and stuff, made a different game out of it, which is why it was published by TSR staff rather than by Lawrence Schick and David Cook.
Okay, cool. Nick, do you have another question for him?
Well, I was just thinking about also on Star Frontiers, how the going to, I guess, basically a different game mechanic. What was the idea behind that, and the play testing and all that on Star Frontiers?
Yeah, I wasn't really involved in the changes in the play mechanics because I was gone by then. But the early play mechanics that I'd come up with were actually very similar to what later came out as the D20 system.
No kidding.
It was a very simple, or rather, it was all based around rolling D20s and checking stats against those rolls and then modifying up or down. It's not. It was. It was. When the D20 system came out, I said, "Oh, look, it's my old system."
A little bit of a
yeah.
That's interesting.
But it's an obvious system in hindsight, right? If you've got a D20 and you've got stats
Sure.
that are around that basis, it makes sense to do it that way.
Right. I always thought that Star Frontiers, in retrospect now, kind of looking back on it, is as far as like the sci-fi aspect of it, the tech-wise, it almost reminds me of if the show Firefly.
Ooh.
In that respect, kind of, it's science fiction, but somewhat low tech in a way. And I'm now kind of looking at it like, wow, Star Frontiers is kind of like that in a way.
Mm.
Well, the problem with technology in a science fiction game is that you have to throttle it back, because otherwise it becomes a game about the gear, and the gear can do anything, right?
Right.
So you have to be careful, about which elements of science fiction you're going to include. Do you have the teleportation? Do you have time travel? What are you going to do? Because introduction of a piece of tech in a story, like teleportation in Star Trek, is not a problem. It doesn't solve everything. Because why? Because the writers don't let it.
Right.
But if you put it in the hands of players, they're just going to go mad with it, and it will be impossible to come up with challenges that can't be solved with teleportation. So, you have to think clearly. You have to pick and choose about what aspects of higher technology you're going to include in a science fiction background for an RPG.
That's great. Cool.
Very interesting. Moving ahead a bunch of years, I noticed on your profile that you had worked for Coleco Industries from 82 to 84, and I definitely grew up playing with that system nonstop.
Yes, ColecoVision.
Which were there any titles that you were involved with for game-wise that maybe we would recognize, or did you just stay in the background and work, or what'd you do?
Oh no,
exactly?
I was one of the designers and team leaders on ColecoVision products, and we also did cartridges for the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision.
Oh, wow.
I did both adaptations of coin-operated games that were popular at the time. I think I did 5 versions of Zaxxon, for example.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Okay, then you contributed to my delinquency as a youth, because that was one of my favorite games.
Yeah, I've got a lot to answer for. I did some original games. I did a Tarzan game. I did a Dukes of Hazzard game for the ColecoVision driving controller without ever having seen an episode of the show. So I was pretty proud of that.
That was amazing, because that was like my favorite game back as a kid, playing the Dukes of Hazzard game. So thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I have to say, though, when talking about ColecoVision, I remember when that hit the market, it was compared to like the other game console systems at the time, talking early mid 80s, as far as graphics wise, it was like a quantum leap, because I remember when you saw ColecoVision Donkey Kong,
yeah,
it looked like the arcade game.
Oh yeah,
it was very well rendered. The Zaxxon game was practically exactly like it. So that ColecoVision was a huge leap over like some of the other game systems at that time. It's pretty impressive.
Well, I wasn't responsible for any of the technical stuff, just the gameplay.
Well, you did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I did a great job. Loved Zaxxon. So.
Now, I noticed that you're currently working on the Elder Scrolls Online, which many people are familiar with the Elder Scrolls game, but I didn't know there was an online game coming out.
Yes, there is. But I'm not authorized to answer questions about it.
However,
your listeners can go to ElderScrollsOnline.com and find out a whole lot of stuff about it. I'm one of the lead writers, and I'm the lore master on the game.
Right.
So I'm responsible for making sure that we are in line with and expand properly upon the Elder Scrolls world.
Right.
So a lot of the stuff on the website is stuff I wrote.
Oh, wow. Amazing. It's a
fantastic.
great game. Do they have any a public release date for it yet, or is that still hush-hush?
No, none has been announced, and that's about all I can say.
That's all
It's,
we know.
it's just in the works, and it's coming to the internet near you.
Right.
Got it.
Okay, so as we're wrapping this up with you, Lawrence, I know you're caught on time here, but I have one last goofy question for you, and I usually ask this to all the guests just to get a good laugh. If you can be a household appliance, which one would you be, and why would you be that one?
Does home computer count?
Sure.
Because that's my home computer is my extra RAM, my memory storage.
We could always use more memory, couldn't we?
Definitely.
Oh yes, especially at my age.
And Lawrence, if anyone wants to contact you or follow you, how can they do that, and where can they go? Are you on Twitter or?
No, I'm not. But you can pretty much, I guess, going to the ElderScrollsOnline.com site is where you're going to see what I'm up to.
Okay.
But I'm not. I don't really have fan notes or things of that sort.
Okay, so you don't have a personal website or anything that people can go to look at things?
Not at present.
Okay.
I do have one quick question before we go. Do you still do any tabletop role-playing from time to time, or any other type of board gaming, what have you?
Absolutely.
Good.
I am actively running a D&D campaign set in the Caribbean Sea of an alternative 17th century with pirates and musketeers and all sorts of fun stuff like that.
Cool. That sounds cool.
And I play with friends and go to conventions. And,
Pirate orcs.
I wonder if they have pig
right.
faces or not.
We got orcish pirates.
Oh, I'm already.
Scottish dwarves.
Nice. All right.
So
Well,
they only use blunt weapons, I suppose.
yes, they do.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Schick, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a great weekend, sir. And maybe we'll talk to you from time to time and see what's going on with Elder Scrolls Online.
My pleasure, and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Roll for initiative.